Hi everyone, today's video is sponsored by Idiomatically Mugging Up. Now actually today's video is going to be, I think, the last one of this playlist, focused on some tips to achieve good and realistic MIDI orchestral mockups. My effort today is addressed to some, let's say, of best practices you should keep in mind when writing for acoustic orchestral instruments. In the previous episode we learned how to cheat, how to pretend our virtual instruments could be confused with real ones. I've talked about some basic techniques for mockups, like, I don't know, layering, understanding verbs, take advantage of accusations. Yeah, man, very well, very well. But you know, if you want to tell your computer to sound like a real violin, then you should know very well how a real human violin player performs on his violin, right? Let's dive straight in. So first off, I want to stress out that it's just impossible, at least for myself, but anyway for the purpose of this video, to paint the full and complex canvas of how to idiomatically write for an instrument in the most appropriate and skilled way. I mean, you should enroll yourself in a music composition course, of course, study orchestration and learn all main techniques of orchestral instruments, right? So we don't care about going so deep inside that topic. We do care instead how to translate this main technique on our computer, in our DAW. All that being said, the first chapter of this video is about some good practices addressed pretty much to all instruments. Sustained notes usually need a fading out, diminuendo, at the end. Generally speaking, the attack of a sustained note as well would need a fading in, crescendo, in a way that you would create a sort of dynamic arc from the very beginning to the very end of the note. But in reality, every instrument has got its own kind of different attack, so that would be not addressed to all instruments. The end diminuendo is a common practice instead, which is spread out in pretty much all orchestral sections. In every orchestral classic composition, every orchestral instrument would play musical phrases exactly with that dynamic arc, making sure to take a breath between different phrases, coming one next to the other. But that's not just a case of woodwinds, brass or choir, strings too, along with keyboards, I don't know, plastic instruments or even percussions to some extent, should take musical breath between phrases. To reach out that warm sound strings often have when playing romantic and legato lines, you could sometimes tweak your equalizer and find the best frequencies balance, or you may trigger the Sordino articulation, as long as your library has got Sordino, of course. Basically, it helps to have a sort of equalization just by itself to attenuate some harsh frequencies just before even loading up your equalizer. Virtual strings in Tremolo usually present a strong attack, so it could be useful to clear it out with other articulation like legato. You know, real acoustic 16th ostinatos, for instance, are not so crispy and sharp like some virtual ones. It's usually very difficult to do it with just one single simple library. Actually, CSS, Cinematic Studio Strings, can do it pretty good, but sometimes we better use the layering technique to get a better fluid quality by blending, you know, different samples and different libraries. A general mix of mic positioning, it's usually okay. So close mic, main plus room, all that plus the SML setup configuration verb, so short, medium, long, which I've talked about in the previous video. Not only phrases breath, but technical ones. I mean, to prevent the death of the player. Air instruments, so woodwinds and brass, have to play musical breaths, which very often, but not always, correspond to the real and technical, let's say, breath they have to take, just to breathe. That's one of the most obvious things when writing for those kind of instruments. But just to recall it to you, these are all notes which have to be enunciated through a strong attack by the player. Basically, the player makes a sort of T sound with his tongue striking the palate, a flute, for instance. They're striking the reed, an oboe or a saxophone, or striking the mouthpiece, all brass instruments. To translate all that in our mockups, we better write a little bump in module automation on the attack of the note to mimic the blowing. That's, by the way, the right situation when a breath MIDI controller could be really, really useful. I don't have one of those MIDI controllers, but I'm definitely planning to buy one, just too curious. In most cases, you better turn off room mic position, so you have close plus overhead or main, no room mic position, plus the usual SML verb setup. The same identical approach I've just discussed for woodwinds has to be applied, I think, to brass as well. Brass players have to breathe. For tongue notes as well, brass players share that same technique with woodwinds, an air instrument in general. What could be slightly different from woodwinds to brass lays probably in the general attack of the sound. In brass instrument, the initial blowing of the player on most notes is even stronger and much more evident compared to woodwinds. Of course, I'm not speaking about notes which have to be played with a crescendo, starting from pianissimo, but notes with dynamic from, let's say, mezzo piano to fortissimo. To perform a realistic text sound of those instruments, you may have to write pretty much the same bump in module, like for tongue notes, but sometimes just a little bit wider. Even for brass instruments, ça va sans dire, the breath controller would make your work much easier. Sometimes you need less close mic position and more room to mimic, the distance to the conductor. So HARP glissando, if you don't have a library which offers pre-recorded glissandos in all different keys and tonality and with different melodic and harmonic patterns, major, minor, pentatonic, octatonic, and whatsoever, you definitely can write your own glissando, playing just white keys on your keyboard and then scale quantizing them. More specifically, if the scale quantizing tool doesn't work properly, exactly the way you like, for instance, it leaves behind some notes which I want instead to be pitched differently in that scale, you could always select all notes within the glissando with that same pitch through a quick shortcut and easily moving them up or down to the right place. Some libraries provide ensemble patches. One could wonder, when are these patches useful? When should I work with them? Well, you can use ensemble patches, I think, mainly in two different ways. First, together with a single instrument to get the sound of your instrument, let's say, warmer, bigger, filling it with more resonance. For example, some melody played by flute, clarinet and oboe in unison, layered with Tutti by Cinesample's Hollywood Woodwinds. Or harp, a single harp layered with, I don't know, with harp and celeste by Bernard Herrmann Composer Toolkit. Why not? Second, in place of the instrument itself. These ensemble patches are usually well made in order to give you a realistic sound of an ensemble of instruments. The final effect you get could be more compelling and easier to achieve compared to using every single instrument of that ensemble by its own, you know. And last but not least, I want to just briefly introduce that topic of the so-called performance-based libraries, modeled libraries. These LIBS often use modeling, synthetic synthesis modeling to achieve a much more nuanced type of playing without, the need of your NIMER, which is key switching articulation, giving you, full control of the phrasing, sample modeling, audio modeling, performance samples, acoustic samples are just three names of these kind of sample libraries developers who do make use of modeling. Because, if you want to idiomatically write for a real acoustic instrument playing on your keyboard with virtual samples, until now, you have to deal very often with key switches, which, by the way, I definitely would not hate. You need a legato patch? Well, you have to trigger the legato articulation playing the right key switch on your keyboard. Do you want a pizzicato? Play the right key switch on your keyboard. Do you like to insert, a horn rip? Yeah, you guessed it. You have to know the corresponding key switch on your keyboard. You'll have to be careful to place it in the right moment above or below your musical lines in your piano roll and so forth, right? With, a resulting messed up piano roll editor with tons of MIDI bricks referring to musical notes, who knows? And other bricks as well corresponding to those key switches. Who are who? I guess if you write music with sample libraries like me, you know very well what I'm talking about. So performance-based instrument can instead follow your own movement and gestures and articulations of your hands and fingers while you're playing on your keyboard to trigger different articulation, different kind of sound of your instrument. You want a staccato sound? Play staccato. You want a legato sound? Play legato. No need to key switches. But what about if I want a pizzicato? I don't know, probably that's the future of sample libraries, modeling, performance-based sample libraries. I guess sample libraries developers will adopt this structure for the virtual instrument more often from now on. And it's easy to understand why. That's the only way you can feel the instrument just at your fingertips. You can instantly translate your musical thoughts in the right sound you asked the computer to make for you. Yet I think artificial intelligence are going to develop much stronger in the future. If your purpose is to mimic in the most perfect way a real instrument sound with your virtual instruments, I think at the moment we have not the right technology to do that. Yeah, we can reach 90% of this cheat effort, but real instruments are real instruments and virtual instruments are just virtual instruments. So that's why, but that's my personal take, AIs in the future will probably find their way out for that purpose. Anyway, guys, my warm thanks to you all for your support. subscribe to the channel if you want to, ding that bell to be notified for every next video I load up, and I'll catch you next time. As usual, take care.